Hey, welcome into the Husker247 HoopsCast. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson. First episode in a little bit. But the Huskers have added to their 2025-26 roster. We got some scheduling news. What better time to dive into things? Bryce Williams is at the NBA Combine. So, bringing in Brian Christopherson, and we are going to discuss some Nebraska basketball. Brian, where do you want to start? You want to get the scheduling stuff out of the way? You want to talk about Fridrik Curtis? Do you want to discuss something else entirely? Do you want to talk more NBA Wolves? Where would you like to go with this?
Let's talk Fridrik Leo Curtis.
Let's do it. All right. Take it away.
I made 7-1. Iceland can shoot it. Really, really impressive stroke. I think he's really fluid too. I mean, you can only get so much out of watching like the highlight clips and stuff, but he's got great change of direction for a big guy. What's interesting about him is he was basically a soccer player up through his teen years. Then of course everybody's like, hey man, you're pretty tall, you should like do this basketball thing. He got into the competitive part, and sometimes you roll your eyes because when a guy like starts playing basketball at 13 or 14 and he's just tall, you're like, well, that's the only reason why he's thriving. But anybody who's watched his highlights sees that he's a very versatile player. That's a nice piece of clay to work with when he gets here. And he was previously committed to Arizona State, decommitted from there on April 18th. He had some visits that kind of stick out, including like going to Indiana during the process. And so I think Nebraska feels really good about him. And like, you don't get this much anymore because it feels so year to year, but ideally he sort of can work into being, he'll be different than Rink Mass, but a guy who can be versatile in that way, stretch the floor as a big. And it was in fact Rink Mass highlights, which I think he really liked, the fact that look at this big who can lead the team in assists and do all these various things.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that Fred Hoiberg felt like his offense was at their best when they've had Rink Mass, when he has a center that can play outside of the 3-point line, when you have the whole offense that can operate outside the 3-point line, and then you get your backdoor cuts, and it opens up some of the spacing for the passing, and opens driving lanes for other players. And so you have Mass for one more year to go and get Fridrik Leo Curtis with the idea that he can be this sort of stretch big that, you know, maybe he's not going to have the same passing chops or the same exact player, but he can help in that regard. And you don't have to have him. He doesn't have to play a huge role for you right away as a freshman. He kind of feel his way into college basketball. It's sort of a luxury addition for Nebraska, and it's one where, you know, it doesn't feel like it's Oleg Kojenets. You know, I don't think this guy's going to be buried at the back of the bench. I think he's going to have an opportunity to play in the, you know, as the game flow is going on, not just if it's a blowout one way or the other.
Yeah. I'm excited about his upside. And again, it could be a deal where he could come in June and start to challenge and help your rotation. And maybe it's going to take a little while. I don't know. But he's definitely got a smoothness to how he moves that you don't always see in big guys. And that
he runs well for a big man. He really does.
How he handles the ball and stuff like that. You know, he's not sloppy with it. So I can see the appeal of him. When I started kind of digging into watching him, I was enjoying it. Like, and so, you know, everyone always gets excited when they see the headline 7-footer too. People kind of gravitate toward it. But then I think once they see more of like, okay, he shot 42% one season from behind the arc. And even though he's played competitive basketball for a relatively short period of time, he's sort of well-traveled with like, you know, the Icelandic teams and things of that nature. He played at a really good, you know, prep program. So in some ways, I think that seasoned him well in a hurry to at least try to take on this challenge.
I'm going to take Mast out of it because he hasn't graduated yet or left Nebraska. He's still got eligibility. Who's your favorite big man in Nebraska basketball history that you've watched? It could be from when you're a kid, because I'm pretty sure you're old enough that you remember Rich King.
Yep.
Certainly more than I could. And I'm just curious, who's your favorite? You know, who's your favorite big throughout the history of Husker basketball?
Rich King is definitely up there. He went to the same elementary school as I did, a few years ahead of me. But Sunny Slope Elementary, shout out. Believe I got that fact right. Mikey Moore is probably my answer. Like, I love Mikey Moore. If you wanted a more obscure answer, Bernard Garner was a guy as just like a big stout guy, and he could freaking back people.
Very nice guy.
Yeah, really? Well, he could back.
Yeah, I mean, he was very nice to me. I don't know what he was like on the court, but
I didn't mean to sound like that was a shock. Like, I can't believe he's a nice guy. But
just like Jack Stoll all over again. You got a beef with Bernard Garner that nobody knows about?
No, I'm saying I really liked him as a player. I just didn't know that, and I said it in a way that sounded like I was skeptical, but I'm not. But man, he could back people down and get himself a layup. And I remember I remember a game in Ames, Iowa in particular. They won on the road at Hilton, and they just could not handle him down there. And so that he sort of has a place in my heart.
Yeah, Nebraska's had some fun big men, if you think about it. You have Vincent Hamilton. You have Kamani Friend. You have Alex Marich. Not on the same level as those guys because he got here later in his career and then it ended with the bad knee injury. But Isaac Copeland was fun for his stretches with that 2017-18 team. And then again in 2018-19. You have some guys that, had unique careers in the short time they were here, and Andre Almeida and Jorge Brian Diaz. So there's been some bigs in Nebraska basketball. They seemingly all come from other countries in the United States, which is fascinating in its own right. But there's definitely been some fun bigs throughout Nebraska basketball. So Tony
Farmer. Tony Farmer, when I was a kid, he was on the team that won 26 games and was the 3 seed. I feel like he maybe didn't get a play in the NCAA tournament game. I shouldn't.
Was he like 6'8"?
Yeah,
was he all the way in the 6'10" to 7 foot?
He's listed at 6'9". I should have saved Tony Farmer for our Guess a Husker game.
A good one.
Originally from Los Angeles, but I remember when he was on that team in the first year they broke through to me. Like was 90-91 and Rich King was on it too. But Tony Farmer, I was like, okay, that feels different. Like Husker basketball's got a different kind of player there. And so he also is a guy I'd mentioned.
Yeah. I think my answer to that question, it's hard because we're just my peak of time of watching Nebraska basketball and yours are a little bit different. Is probably Vincent Hamilton. You just as a kid, he just seems so big and block shots. And my favorite NBA player was Hakeem Olajuwon probably at that point. And so not that Vincent Hamilton and Hakeem have a lot in common, but the idea when you're a kid of just the big guy that can swat the ball away, grab rebounds, he just stands out. And so Vincent Hamilton comes to mind. And then as more of an adult or certainly college age, I really like watching Marich play. He felt like he gave up. He should have been able to make more around the rim, have a little bit better touch around the rim. But that guy had some big games in what was a pretty loaded Big 12 environment during that time. And, Nebraska was able to go toe-to-toe with some good teams because Alex Marich was tough to defend. I mean, he'd get your guys in foul trouble. He was just a load down low in terms of getting rebounds. He could alter shots. Again, not a superstar by any means, and certainly felt like someone who there was maybe a little bit more out there than what he got statistically, but he was definitely a favorite of mine during the Doc. He and Doggenduro are my 2 favorite players of the Doc Sadler stretch for sure. You
could make a list of Huskers who had the potential on a given night to just dominate a game.
Yeah.
And Alex Marich was definitely would be in my top 5 that I've seen. I was at Missouri who he went off in that over
40. We could have 50 some points if he made free throws that night too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nuts. They had no answer. They just fed him over and over and over inside.
He had a few games like that. And so that's why I would put him on that list where if I think of Huskers, they had it was within them on a given night. You can't stop him. He could do that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Let's dive back to the current roster. Now that they've added Fridrik Leo Curtis, it feels like Nebraska has kind of their complete roster here of what this is going to look like for the 25-26 season. What's your kind of initial impression about how Fred Hoiberg and staff did in terms of putting this thing together?
I like it on paper. I know I'm trying to think of the name. I'm blanking on it now. Who ended up at USC that they were in on?
Yeah, the Utah.
Yeah, like in my mind, watching his clips and stuff, I think he would have, like, if you're saying like what completes the puzzle to you, he was it maybe. However, I think there was a lot of money spent on him elsewhere, and so that's the way it goes. They brought in Jared Garcia, who's from Tulsa, experienced guy. He can shoot it a little bit too from outside, or at least has shown that possibility. He'll be a veteran there. But I think Price Sanford, I go back to him. It's been a while since he committed, so we've kind of all adjusted to the idea that
This
he's
is the
just
first
on.
one.
Yeah, so he's been on the list a while, so it's easy to like just move on to all the others. But he is very much on the path I think that his brother Peyton was, as far as like where he was 2 years into his college career. And I'm not saying it's going to fall directly, but Peyton, his junior year, really took a huge step. And I think you saw signs that Price was kind of connecting to that same path at the end of last year, including the game in Lincoln where he went off. And I mean, you heard Fred right after they lost that game to Iowa. He said in the post game, like, we hit 100 less threes this year. Now they made some of it up in the Vegas tournament, but basically apples to apples, they were like 100 less threes. And a Sejan, who had some tough moments, like in big time shots, was actually, though, at the same percentage clip that Casey was the year before. So if you took those numbers, you say, well, Connor can be kind of Casey going forward, but you need other options. As I always say, like, if one guy's off, this guy can be on. And so adding Sanford, adding Jamarcus Lawrence, who I think got a lot out of playing in the A10. Now, I interviewed Jamarcus about coming back, and he was really a big fan of the A10, and like he said, there's just like a lot of guys with chips on their shoulders in that league, and it, I think, brought a lot out of him to be a leader on that particular team, to have his voice grow. And I think that year away, don't just look at the numbers. I think it was a good experience for Jamarcus, and he can come back here and actually take another step off of it. And he can be a point weapon too. He's been improving his shot, and he hit some big shots a couple years ago. So Sanford, Lawrence, Kendall Blue shot it pretty well at St. Thomas, Minnesota. I just like that they've added the different options where you feel like if one guy's off, this guy could help pick up the slack.
Yeah, you didn't even mention Oogie
Yeah.
from Central Michigan, who was a pretty good front court player that has the ability to stretch things out as well. The guys that are returning for them in Asian and Burke, I'm fascinated what steps they can take in their game. Brian, I look at this roster and they're going to have a long time to try to figure this out, but there's a lot of different rotations if they can play. There's a lot of different guys whose playing time, I don't know if it's guaranteed or what it exactly looks like. What is, after the Crown tournament, what is Cale Jacobson's role at Nebraska? Is it elevated from where it was last year? Or is he right back into end of the first half to avoid foul trouble? He's out there because he's a smart, heady player. Do you try to get him more meaningful minutes? Does Sam Hoiberg lose some playing time with some of the guards that you were able to bring in here? But do you need his defense on the court at times, or certainly the free throw shooting? And then he was able to knock down threes. He was shooting 50% at one point, and I think it ended right around 40. But I think they have a lot of bodies. They have a lot of interesting bodies. It'll be fascinating how long it takes for them to settle on what their sort of best 7-8 players are, and then the style of which that comes out of it. Because I think that you could end up with some really different looking lineups that allow you to play differently. Can Kendall Blue step into a Jawan Gary-esque role where he's a little bit of does everything, can shoot from the corner, can get to the rim, can attack, can help play defense, can get rebounds? Is he that kind of guy? Like, what is Jamarcus Lawrence's role second go around at Nebraska? You mentioned that he enjoyed playing in the A10 because of the competitive nature of it, and guys that felt like they had something to prove because they were playing in that conference. Well, what does it look like for him this second go around at Nebraska? Is he more of a facilitator? Is he more of a scorer? Combination of the things. So just a fascinating roster that I think they put together. And I don't know if I'm just drinking too much off-season Kool-Aid or have too much trust that they're able to pick it up. But I have to say, I feel better about what the collection looks like right now than sort of what was assembled without rink mass last year going into the season, if that makes any sense. Like I'm a little bit more, this feels a little bit more like, hey, there's some guys here that have potential to shoot well and to put up points for Nebraska. And I don't know, maybe I'm just overselling it. I'm buying too much right now.
I think in general, we're probably a little more optimistic than probably most, but you know what? Last year's team, as flawed as it was, and obviously there's the Bryce factor. I mean, that's a hard guy to replace, but they should have been they shoulda, coulda, but should have been in the tournament again. Like, so if you talk about Hoiberg, the last like 3 portal cycles, I think that first year with like Grissel and Bandamel and those guys, they were starting to figure out what they wanted to be, and there was a redirect of where things were going. And that's why you're always going to get 2 camps when you talk about Husker basketball during the Hoiberg era so far. You're going to get the camp that always brings up his full record, and that's fair to do. It's on the sheet. And then there's some people say, I understand that, but I think they did a change of direction. They recalibrated like 3 years ago, and since then, you felt like they're either in it or they're just off of it. And I actually do feel a little bit better about this team on paper than last year. A big part of it's Rink coming back. I have a lot of respect for him. And so do the Big Ten coaches, by the way, who voted him like 3rd team because they know how everything worked off of him. And so, no, I mean, we'll see. But I'm glad you brought up Oogie. He's a really interesting piece. And I still think the wild card, and some people won't want to hear this, but it's Berke.
I knew where you were going because I agree.
We're not done with them here. Some people, I think they know what his story is or what he is as a basketball player. I don't necessarily think that. I think he can shoot it a little bit better, but I also think even if you take that away, I think there's more of Berke that we saw in that game, the St. Mary's game. We brought it up on here before, but you were there in person. And there was like 10 minutes within that second half where Nebraska was clawing back and playing great basketball. And a big part of it was that was the best, like I thought Berke was almost all season. Just like doing little stuff, like just a guy somehow found the basketball or was getting a rebound when you didn't expect it against an NCAA tournament team, by the way. And I think that's within him to be more consistent like that. But he's got to prove it. And it sounds like he's going to stick around here this summer. Not, he played with country basketball and all that stuff last year, and that's good too. But I think there's a lot to be said for, him being around and them building that chemistry throughout this summer.
Not to go all Matt Rule, Dylan Raiola here, but I am hopeful for Berke that the off-season conditioning gets him to a little bit better kind of shape than what he was in at times last year. I mean, he definitely came to Lincoln heavier than I think the anticipation was. And it's not like he was sluggish or anything like that. I think anytime that he might have been slow to do something, it's because his brain was a little more mechanical than just reactionary. But I do think that if he's in a physically better position, he's going to be an even more dangerous rebounder, a more physical player inside. And I think it'll help his shooting legs. I mean, sometimes when he was out there shooting at the end, he just was chucking more than he was shooting. And they think he's a shooter. Like they genuinely, and I mean, the stories people would kind of say about what things look like in October and November and practices over there. And he was ripping the nets shooting against Nebraska's defense. Now there's a joke in there about Nebraska's 3-point defense, I'm sure, but he was doing it in practice. It's how can they get him to look like that more in games? And I think it starts with, a strong summer of strength and conditioning, physically being in the best shape that he's ever been, I think could really help that guy. But you're right. I mean, he is a guy that they haven't given up on over there. I think he's viewed still potentially as a starter or as a critical piece in this whole thing. So, I mean, despite all of these additions, Berke is going to be a big part of the whole story for 25-26.
I mean,
And, go ahead.
well, I mean, he had one of his best games before he got injured with like a minute left too.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wasn't the same after the
No.
injury. Like he had, it was probably a deal where if that injury, I'm speaking out of pocket here, but it's just me looking at the situation where if that injury happens like in November or December, you maybe give him a couple more weeks, but they were in the, thick of it, and he had to come back like a week or so later, and he just didn't have it. Like, he lost his momentum as a shooter, and some people can be snarky, but he did have a great shooting game just before that, or a really solid outing. And I feel like it kind of disrupted his momentum. So it's a bad break that happens. You got to move on from it. But that, I would just say, to add the whole context of the story, I think contributed to sort of the negative take on him at the end of the year, because he did get so cold. And I think a big part of it was the disruption after he had that. It was just a bad situation for Nebraska. They won that game, but I remember in the post game, it was kind of that feeling from Fred. You could tell that was a bad injury to have happen with 40 seconds left. And it might have impacted the fact that they didn't get in the tournament when it was all said and done.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, they were on their winning streak at that point, and then the injury happens, and you lose to Maryland, then you have to come back against Northwestern, and then the losing streak to end the rest of the year, and you have the guy that you're relying on is sort of a shell of what he was. But we will see what it looks like for Berke in 2025-26. BC mentioned his best game was up in Sioux Falls at the Pentagon, not the Premier Center, at the Pentagon. And Nebraska will be back there again in 2025, playing in November, this time against Oklahoma. It's become their home away from home, the Sanford Pentagon. How do you feel about Nebraska almost yearly playing in Sioux Falls now?
Love it. I mean, it's a cool venue, as you know. This week's cool.
I do understand. I made the joke about the Premier Center, and it just came up on the board. But for me, a lot of it is they can play in arenas that look like the Premier Center. What makes that series stand out is that you're playing in this kind of old-timey gym with old acoustics, and how loud the crowd gets when Nebraska was throttling Oregon State, or their comeback that they had against St. Mary's. Like that building sounds awesome, when there's a few thousand people going nuts for Nebraska in there.
Yeah, and not that we have to always contrast everything off of football, but I do think it's cool that this year it's during a bye week of football. And so maybe some people who haven't gone for that reason, maybe they will. It's on a Saturday, November 15th. And also, pretty important part of this, they're playing two neutral site games in Kansas City too. Those can be pretty effective toward your net rankings if you win them. The boundaries expand for you as far as what counts as a quad 1 and quad 2, as opposed to if you played them in Lincoln. And you don't get hit as hard too if you lose them. So I think that's a good reason to play it, where you're kind of going to have a home game, which they will. I know Oklahoma's a proud program, but Nebraska, that'll be like a home Husker game, maybe a little closer than it has been in the past with the crowd. But you get that aspect, and you get the neutral site benefit in the rankings. And then, of course, they play in Kansas City. It's actually the next weekend. And K-State, Mississippi State, and New Mexico are there. That's a decent field. So,
yeah,
if you could win like 2 out of those 3 early on neutral site games, that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, so Oklahoma made the NCAA tournament. New Mexico made the NCAA tournament, and Mississippi State made the NCAA tournament. So you got 3 returning tournament teams there. And Kansas State had a bit of a down year this past year. And then Nebraska, as we know, didn't make the tournament either. But those are high quality non-conference neutral site games. They're fun. Both of those trips are easy to make, whether it's down to Kansas City for the 2-night event or up to Sioux Falls. I mean, there should be plenty of Nebraska fans that want to partake on that. And then I think the very next weekend after that is Nebraska against what will certainly be a top 10 Creighton team. So that'll be back in Omaha, I believe. Correct?
No, it's in Lincoln this year.
Oh, is it in Lincoln?
Yeah,
can't
because
remember.
Nebraska beat them out there.
That's right.
Way out there. Nebraska took the flight to Omaha.
How could I forget that I was in person at the game and I forgot.
They kind of run together. This will be a chance to try to get redemption for 2 years ago when it was just a bad deal. Of course, if that season went as it went after, like that one did, you'd take it because Nebraska, that was their only game they lost at PBA all year. So,
and that looks like a very, very good on paper Creighton team. So that will be
they're gonna be good.
Heck of a game. So yeah, it should be a fun November of Nebraska basketball, at least in terms of matchups. A little bit better than this past year where everything was kind of built to that St. Mary's Creighton two-step, and then everything around it was a lot of North Florida and South Dakota and a directional state from here or there. So a little more excitement in the first month of the season for Nebraska.
They've done well too, though, in those last couple of years. Remember, it was kind of the knock on Husker hoops for a while there, where it was like they would always lose. Incarnate Word's always the one that gets brought up, but somebody like that would kind of step on their toes and just be this nasty blemish that you couldn't watch it from your mouth. And they've done a nice job of avoiding that too. So, I mean, that part's also going to be critical, like having that type of team that just handles business and doesn't have that eyesore game. I think that's really been useful to them, in staying in the hunt to be on the brackets, is that they've avoided that. So we'll see. But like I said, if they could get 2 of those 3, that'd be a nice little thing on your resume, those neutral site games before Creighton.
No doubt about it. Not sure when we will be back with the Husker 24/7 HoopsCast. Maybe we'll have an idea or a topic we want to dive into a little bit more for basketball. Maybe we do some off-season HoopsCast podcasts. Maybe we can get Bernard Garner to come on here and talk to BC, and BC can learn that he's a nice man as well.
I don't doubt he is. I don't know why it sounded like I was like, really? How could that be?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll look into some options here for some off-season podcast content. But as always, you can get everything you need at Husker247.com. For Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker 24/7. We'll catch you next time.